Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Happy Monday for all of you. I'm burning some extra Palo Santo today because, wow, can use all the help we can get right now. So, welcome to the Daily Medicine Transmission. It's September 13th, 2021. It is Monday morning, and I hope everyone had a great weekend, if in fact it was a weekend for you. The United States and likely other parts of the world commemorated and memorialized 9/11 2001. It was the 20th. I hate to call it an anniversary, but it was the 20th year since 2001, since the Twin Towers. So I went to the memorial ride in the county that I live in every year. There's a large motorcycle ride, and they raise a bunch of money and do a fundraising event, and they have a ceremony at the beginning of the route, and then all of the money that is collected is actually donated to a family of a first responder that died in the line of duty on 9/11 2001. So it actually has some significance other than just motorcycles riding from point A to point B. So it was about 3,000 motorcycles, and it was very inspiring in a lot of ways to see people's spirit still be unsquashed, right? People who refuse to have their spirit be tampered down and as a result of what occurred on that day. So, and we're still dealing with that, aren't we? We are still fighting that good fight. So, whatever you were getting into over the weekend, I hope that it brought that spirit out in you. And today's transmission really is about rising to the occasion when it comes to the events that we are finding ourselves in right now. Wow, the lighting as usual is very terrible. I'm so sorry, guys. Let me see what I can do about this and not have this terrible glare on me. Wow. Yeah, that's not going to work either. So let's see. Here we go. That'll be better. I know it's dark. It's really not important what I'm looking like right now. It's important to hear what I'm saying and to get some sort of look at my expression, of course. But I did get some feedback about that from an individual who actually is very hearing impaired and has to read lips and looks at people's facial expressions and the energy that's coming off of them when they're speaking. So I know that it is actually important. I'm still going to burn some more Palo Santo. We really need to like I said, all the help we can get today. So our moon is in Sagittarius today. We have our first quarter square. We have our first quarter square of the sun and the moon, and we are, oh, that's better. We are in an opposition to Neptune as well. So that will be creating a T-square. We'll go into all of that astrology today. I did talk about it on the astrology report that I put up on Friday about what to expect over the weekend. That Scorpio moon was certainly very impactful. And I will say, somebody said this to me today, and it was definitely what I was thinking, and they just verbalized it. The darkness is definitely eating people alive right now. And we've been talking about this. We've been talking about this time for months and months and months. And now that it's here, right? So for those of us who have been prepared, even with the most preparation, it never takes the place of the actual experience of living in the moment. So that's something to consider as well, and to be easy on yourself, to give yourself plenty of time and space to process things, to allow the feelings to move through you, to realize how incredibly powerful they are, so that you can direct the course of that flow to solutions, to empowerment, right? And to, in fact, rising to the occasion. Because, it's very palpable right now, very palpable. And it already started last week. Many people were already pre-waving it. Many people were already feeling the buildup. And now there has been kind of this moment over the weekend, especially with that Scorpio moon, where the depth of the feeling became very personal, and it became very unavoidable. over the weekend. And our job now is to transmute this energy, to not look away, to, as I said before, to eat that shit for breakfast and use it as your fuel for transmutation, to acknowledge the unconscious and to acknowledge the shadow, your own shadow, and to incorporate that into your whole being, to allow it to infuse you, not in a negative way, but to see the full picture and to be an integrated whole person. And I think that we're still struggling with this. And whether we like it or not, it's still going to, we're still going to be led to this place, whether we like it or not. And so it really does depend on how you hack your own shadow. That's really the trick, is to hack your own shadow. Because if you don't do that, it will be hacked for you. And I assure you that has been happening for a long time. And we've all been subjected to it. There is no shame whatsoever in seeing that you've been duped, that we've all been duped, that we have been taken, our shadow has been manipulated and hacked for the benefit of a very few. And it's important to realize that and to be solution oriented, to put your mental efficiency and acuity towards solutions, and to not turn away from the truth. One thing that occurred to me over the weekend, something very specific came to mind, is that when you finally open your eyes to the light, right, it can be very blinding if they've been closed, or if you've been in the dark, or you've been asleep. When you first open your eyes, it's so bright and blinding that the your first instinct is to close them, right? But as you allow yourself to be acclimated, as you open them, as you realize that having access to light, light infusing your eyeballs is not going to necessarily burn them out of your head as you open your eyes. So, but it also, when people don't realize that their eyes are closed this whole time, when you tell them, hey, open your eyes, or hey, wake up, it sounds insane. It sounds insane to people who are not functioning in a context where they even realize that their eyes are closed. And we've all been going through this. Every single person has been going through this on their own journey. So it's just important, too, to be compassionate, to be understanding, right? To show love to people, unconditional love and forgiveness, and to realize that it's already done, right? The timeline that we're all going, and this is unpopular, right? People do not like this message, and there's nothing I can do about it. This is the vessel that I have been given, and this is the truth that is coming through for me. And there is one timeline. There is one event horizon that we're going towards, and everything that we are seeing now is mitigation on some level. And it doesn't mean it doesn't have a very real impact. We have to acknowledge that as well. We have to be very realistic that it has actual impact on the people around us. It has actual impact on us. But to realize that it is now the unfoldment. We've been part of this unfoldment that really was brought to its point of no return at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January 2020. Now, it has been the case that this timeline, no matter what decisions get made, no matter what input humanity makes at this point to this one singular event horizon, right? And what is the event horizon? It is that part of circling the black hole where there is no return, right? Everything goes in. And at this point, it's about how do you want to experience this event, right? That's what we have choice over, is how we experience this event. What type of relationship are we going to have with it? Does it mean that we are complacent? No, far from it. In fact, that's going to be a lot of today's transmission, is how do we rise to the occasion? How do we transmute this energy? How do we find solutions, or how do we put into effect solutions that we are being offered in some ways, suggestions, solutions, brainstorming, right? Coming together and talking to people, coming up with real solutions, and not getting caught up in the fear mongering. And there's there's a difference between not getting caught up in it and not acknowledging that there is something to this darkness that is absolutely presenting itself, because you can't transmute without the two polarities, right? The phoenix rising needs to bring these two aspects together. So let's go into the reading, because I just want to show you today how clear this message came in. And one thing that I also want to share about my own process this morning is that it's been a while, but Kuan Yin came in very strongly today. And so compassion, real fierce compassion, right? Where does compassion come from? It comes from real empathy with people suffering, right? You're suffering, other people suffering, really empathizing, not shutting yourself off because you think it's too 3D to empathize and be compassionate. Real compassion means actually empathizing with other people's suffering. And when we can do that, it allows us to really actually connect to other people instead of bypassing the whole experience by transcending it entirely, right? We still have to, as starseeds, be on the ground. I mean, this is part of being the ground crew, right? This is what we came in for. This is what we volunteered for. This is our mission. And it doesn't really serve the mission to take ourselves out of the fray entirely. Our job is to anchor the light, not to take it somewhere else because it's too uncomfortable to be on the ground, empathizing and directly connecting to the experience, right? That doesn't mean we have to keep creating it for ourselves. We have a choice of where to have our energy resonating. That is up to us, right? That is the only choice that we really have, is our own field and how it resonates. And it does attract to us that which is resonating at the same frequency. But that doesn't mean that we are not in a position where we don't acknowledge what is actually happening, right? We do have to, I would say that it is our job, it's our responsibility in this position to be able to anchor the light in the face of the darkness, instead of, trying to convince ourselves that if I just don't think about it, it won't exist, right? It's so much more nuanced and so much more sophisticated. And if you think that hasn't been figured out already by other people that are hacking our shadow, then I don't know what else to say about that. So let's look at the reading for today. I know this is an unpopular, and I've been saying it for weeks now, that this is unpopular perspective because this community wants to put their heads in the sand and pretend that this is not going to affect them directly or their family. And that's not how we're going to wake up, right? Like as a community, as a global community, we have to all experience it to its fullest in order to transmute it. And that is just what is happening right now. So here we are with our reading today, and we're going to see here on this horizontal axis here, right, what we're experiencing out in the outer manifestation. What happens when we don't acknowledge what is happening, when we utilize introversion and retreat, not for doing the work on our own shadow, getting into the depth of what is under the surface and utilizing it for our own growth and discipline, but when we literally put our heads in the sand. Because where it leads to is the same conclusion. It's just that it's not going to be accepted very well by the mind. We have our 10 of Swords, which no matter which way you flip it is still the end of a cycle and is still ruined no matter what. But when it's reversed, it's not, we don't learn as much in that situation, or we certainly are offering some measure of resistance to learning from that situation. So we're going to start here with our Hermit, our Virgo card, Saturn in Aquarius, right? This looking for wisdom, the search for wisdom, going underneath the surface, utilizing the medium of our growth as, providing what we need to grow, right, under the surface. It's not glamorous, right? It's not very It's not very exciting. It certainly doesn't really fulfill the ego. The hermit pushes away from society. The hermit is introverted. The hermit retreats from social life in order to get into these spaces. And as you see here, we have Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who guards the gates of the underworld, right? We are intentionally going into these spaces, going underneath the surface in order to pull out the light from the darkness, to be able to shine that light for not only ourselves, but for others as well. You can see that the hermit is surrounded by the wheat, right? Because we are talking about Virgo time, when the fruit is coming to full maturity that bears the seed for the next cycle. Because Virgo, and we are in Virgo season, right? We have Virgo new moon. We have the sun in Virgo in a square to a Sag moon today, in opposition to Neptune in Pisces. We're still in Virgo season. And the idea of Virgo is that we are part of something more than just ourselves. We don't exist in a vacuum. We have to do this work as individuals, but we are part of something more than just ourselves. And we will be setting the tone, creating the seed for the next cycle. It's not just about us in this moment, but what is going to come for the next 7 generations, right? And where we're coming from. We are a function of our own past, right? Fate is nothing more than a cause and effect relationship. And so the work that we actually do, the root system that pulls the nutrients from the soil in order to support the plant that is supporting the fruit that holds the seed, this is all of the work that we're doing on our own shadow realm, right? And using it. We're using it to fulfill our needs of growth, right? This is where the transmutation eventually comes in with Sagittarius. But right now in Virgo, it is about the individual doing the work, getting into the depth of the underworld of the self and the subconscious, and really working that system. You see that the serpent is surrounding the egg. You see that there is kind of like this, I'm not even sure what this is, but you could even look at it as it kind of like a sperm in some ways, right? And there's light all over, shining all over from what this person, the hermit, is holding. And the back is turned, right? The back is turned, and there is a sense of turning away and turning towards this new cycle, right? Where the serpent is coiling around the egg of something new. Now, this hermit is reversed as our causal factor, which is pretty, this is when we are turning away, not out of doing the work, but out of fear, out of bitterness, right? And straight up, this is, the bypassing, putting our heads in the sand, right? Retreat that turns into a runaway, right? This is not about retreating into the self and facing ourself, but this is running away from our responsibilities. It's running away from the situation. It's like, here, let me just hide over here and not do any work, but still push away all of the outer experiences. So this is not very well aspected, especially with a sun in Virgo right now. So it's been illuminated. It has been illuminated and will continue to be illuminated. And in fact, with the new moon, that seed point is now growing. And the Scorpio moon, like I said, it was not easy. There was a lot of depth of feeling and intensity, especially because of the weekend that it was and the date that it was, and what it brought up for so many people, right? That depth of feeling. And this is how we easily get hacked, right? Our shadow gets hacked when we don't really go into it and see how we are manipulated, right, in terms of our emotional aspect and our subconscious. And when we don't actually do the work and we are bypassing it and literally putting our heads in the sand or just pretending it doesn't exist, this is where we run into problems. So you can see this whole axis here is all reversed. So there's a ton of resistance right now. Now, the 9 of Discs, another Virgo card, this time Venus in Virgo, also reversed. Now, when it's upright, gain, right? This is material gain, wealth, coming in. It is the culmination, just like the Hermit, it's a 9, right? This 9 is a culmination point of perfection in some ways. 3 times 3 is the 9. And so in the sense with Venus especially, it's a sensitivity to material gain, like everything that we have done coming to fruition in a very material way. And with Virgo, again, it's about what are we doing with our environment, with our material resources, our financial resources, our energetic resources. What are we doing with them in order to make the most of them for our own growth, our own discipline, our own purification? Again, when it's reversed, remember, Venus is about being sensitive to the world around her. And now she's in Scorpio. She is at her detriment. This is where she is the least powerful, because the depth of the darkness and the feeling of the power of our relationships, for better or for worse, is a place that is very difficult for this type of archetype. Now, so reversed, right? Gain is becoming really kind of obsessed with it, and being very materialistic, right? Venus is about the sensitivity to the material environment. She wants to be comfortable. She wants to be secure. She wants to gain, right? And so in reversal, there is kind of this obsession with it, right? You get really caught up in the materialism of it. Exploitation in order to gain as well is another part of it, right? Venus attracts and pulls in that which allows her to feel comfortable and secure. So the dark side of that is to be manipulative, be exploitive, right? To pull in what makes us feel secure in a material way rather than considering how it impacts other people. So we become so focused on this gain materially that we kind of forget about anything else, right? It's just about us in that moment. Venus, for all of the beautiful aspects that she represents, all of these archetypes have their polarity. And that polarity is some darkness, which is why she has a hard time being in Scorpio, because that pulls, you have no choice but to get to the depth of what that behavior actually brings about, right? Scorpio in the 8th house is about our shared resources, what we create together, the power of symbolism and ritual, right? And when we are unconscious about those things, doesn't mean we're not participating. In fact, that is far from it. But in any case, in this position right now, the gain, right? We become hyper-focused on what we don't have and trying to gather it in, pull it in, attract it in, right? Venus is the attractor. And we forget about everything else, right? It just becomes about what makes us comfortable in this moment. Well, again, when we've been putting our heads in the sand and bypassing this work, or just not acknowledging that it's happening, and there's a lot of different groups of people that are doing this, right? We've all done it to a certain extent. This is not to, say that certain people are not responsible for themselves. We're all responsible. Every single person here is responsible. I mean, if we're going to go on this, we're creating our reality. Well, here we are. Well, we've created it. And so now we have to take responsibility for that. But what has been happening is still this bypassing and running away, right? And retreating from the reality of the situation. And now we find ourselves in the heart of the moment where we are we're kind of obsessed with it, pulling it in, trying to pull it in, right? Venus is like, I want to pull it in. I want to attract. I want this. I want this. I want this. And we become kind of exploitive and abusive in the meantime. And it doesn't matter which perspective you're coming from. It's still the same general attitude about not going into our own shadow, not really using that time of retreat to go deeply into ourselves and purify ourselves and do this work. And it doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't matter your perspective, where your value system is. It's the fact that when you don't take the time to really go into what that means for you and where you're coming from, then when you get to this point, you feel like you haven't gained anything, then you become obsessed with it, and you will do what you feel like you need to do in order to pull this in. And you can really, really feel this right now, from just about every angle, is that people, grasping and becoming very hyper focused on this materialism because we don't feel comfortable, right? Venus does not feel comfortable, or that she's gained what she wants. And so this is a difficult, all of this is difficult. I totally acknowledge this, and we're all going through it on some level, right? So now our 8 of forces here, the lightning bolt also reversed. And so we know when it's in this position here, that it's in our subconscious energetically. It is where we're drawing our power from, whether we are aware of it or not. That's something to also keep in mind, is if we are not aware of it, then it doesn't make it any less potent. We're still drawing our power of manifestation from this place, regardless if we are aware of it or not. And I would argue that this reading is showing us, for those who are unaware of it, where this is leading. Now, the lightning bolt, when it's reversed, right, it's already happened, right? The storm has already come and passed. The impact of it has already made itself known, right? The lightning bolt has struck, right? It has already severed the tree in half. It is something that is over and done with to a certain extent, and now it's time to start setting new roots. Now it's time to start clearing some debris away. It's already happened. Like the storm is upon us is old news now, and we're drawing our power from this place of it's already passed. Okay, and this is something we're all drawing our power from right now, because again, there's one singular timeline that we're heading towards, and the choice that we have is how we're going to experience it along the way, right? How we're going to experience it along the way, and what we're going to do with ourselves in relation to others as this timeline is unfolding, right? So we're drawing our power from this. It's already over, right? The game is over, and everything that you're seeing is the expression of this, or the new reality that is unfolding as a result of it. This already happened. Saturn and Pluto was in a conjunction in January 2020, the beginning of the end, right? It's already been initiated, and now it's about the new roots, the new ground, the future, right? Rising to the occasion and facing the future. We're all here right now, right? But we're facing this lack of gain here, this compulsion in some ways, and this materialistic thinking on material gain that is kind of hyperinflated, because we feel like that we're losing, or we feel like that we're not gaining, or we want something to allow us to feel more comfortable that in fact is going away or was never there in the first place, and we're becoming aware of it. That's the other thing. By the time you get to the 9, it's a culmination. You are just now pulling in everything that has happened, right? It's not the beginning of the cycle. You are nearing the end of the cycle and feeling very uncomfortable in a material way. And where we're drawing our power from, again, is the fact that the cycle has ended. The 8 of forces in the Akashic Tarot is the end of the suit, right? And then it goes on to the court cards. So the lightning bolt has struck. The power has already made itself known, and has created the fire that from which we need to rise from, right? And this is what's happening. We're rising up through this vertical axis, and we come to the 4 of forces. Now, when it's upright, this is the spring, which seems kind of counterintuitive for the northern hemisphere, but just keep in mind that the other part of the world in the southern hemisphere is about to have their spring equinox. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Just because we're here in the north doesn't mean that we are all on this planet going into autumn. In fact, there's a whole other side of the world that's about to go into spring. But this is really showing us, again, so the 8 of forces, and then you divide that in half and you have the 4, right? And the 4 is very structurally sound. It's very, it's got the four walls. It's a square. It represents the form and the crystallization of whatever suit that it finds itself in. And the forces is the fire energy. So when we have the 4 forces upright, that fire energy that is very structurally sound and secure, it's springtime, right? And what happens in spring? Well, you start preparing the ground to plant something new, right? So we know the 8 of forces reversed is the fact that at the very deepest levels, it's already over, right? It's already over. And so as we draw our power from this place, even when we are uncomfortable with what we haven't gained and we become kind of obsessed with it or exploitive, however you want to see this, we can at least release our power into a place where, okay, it's time for the cycle to start back over. So that means it's time to start conditioning the land for something new to grow. That is what springtime really represents, new growth. And there is some work that goes into this. The Forces is an action card. It's the wands, it's the fire that we engage in some action on some level in our conscious awareness and in our mind, in our attention, in our solutions, right? Start planting seeds, start conditioning the land, right? You're tilling the soil, you're preparing it in order for new growth. That's where we're at right now, instead of fighting against something that's already happened. And it's not to say that we are not supposed to be fighting, but what actions we take right now are going to be the actions that prepare for what's to come. Right? An asteroid Ceres is in conjunction with Aldebaran right now, fixed star Aldebaran. Success through integrity. We see our elk right at the top here. Integrity. Success through integrity, not through obsession and not because of betrayal, right? That's Antares, the heart of the scorpion. Also important, and the moon has crossed over this point, or will cross over this point, has actually, as of yesterday, crossed over this point of Antares. So we are feeling the sting, right? And it's up to us. It's our choice about how we take that energy and what we do with it and how, our transmutational capacity. And are we going to use it to stay focused on the betrayal? Or are we going to take that energy, transmute it, and rise from it and create the groundwork for where we are going? Okay? This is where our solutions and our conscious mind comes into effect. Not if we just think about where we want to go, it'll happen. We have to visualize it, of course. We have to feel the resonance in our creative seat, which is in our sacral chakra. And then we allow our conscious mind to do what it's meant to do, which is provide solutions, allow our empirical reasoning to, take in data and work with it and create a medium for new growth. This is where we can probably have the most effect on our reality right now. So where we find the effect here, even with all of this, right? Ruin, the 10 of Swords. We know that this is the end of a cycle in terms of our mind, right? The swords are the mental activity in the mind, and they are always double-edged, aren't they? They're always double-edged because for all of the clarity and the sharpness and the truth that goes along with it, it does sting and it cuts, right? There's no emotional or there's no, material aspect that's, eventually the sword may dull, right? I suppose. But the idea here is that we're coming to the end of a cycle and you have to realize that mentally you want to plant a new mental seed at the end of this. And the ruin references the fact that if you just endlessly analyze, right? It's the sun in Gemini. If you just endlessly analyze, if you endlessly allow the mental sphere to just go on and on and on without applying it to anything, then yeah, you eventually you eventually come to ruin because there's nothing to be gained from that situation. So when it's reversed, that we don't learn our lesson. Basically, there's resistance to the sting, or there's resistance to the realization that is painful, but at the very least we could realize. So when it's reversed, ruin, loss, destruction, pain, catastrophe, all of those terrible words. I mean, this is not a very favorable outcome in terms of the horizontal axis here of what we are experiencing outside of us. But it does appear here that it is a necessary component to a causal factor of not dealing with what's actually going on in our own shadow, right? Not doing the shadow work, not acknowledging what's happening, right? Just because you're a hermit doesn't mean you don't know what's going on. It means that you are, Mars is at the very last degree of Virgo today. And is going to move into Libra tomorrow, where Mars will lose a lot of power and move into that diplomacy role, right? So if you are relying on Mars exclusively to get you through this warrior energy, it's going to be a little bit more difficult when Mars moves into Libra because that's where Mars is at his detriment. is in Libra. All of that energy goes into the application of our knowledge to find perfect balance and form. So in some ways, there is this justice warrior energy that comes in, right? But it's way more diplomatic, and it's about finding perfect form, not about actualizing the self and acting on the ego. So Mars is in the last degree of Virgo, really challenging us to kind of like close the outer doors of perception so we can focus in on our spiritual attainment, whatever that is. Now, again, with the Hermit reversed, again, this is not a well-aspected pulling away from society. This is a hiding. This is a runaway. This is a bypass. And then we find ourselves like, oh gosh, things are not, I don't like what has culminated at a physical level here, in a material level. I'm very sensitive to the material world because that's what Venus does. And she is not happy here. And so there is this inevitable conclusion here in our minds that everything, is leading to a kind of a destructive phase that will, in fact, whether we like it or not, is going to turn back over into a new cycle. It just depends, again, on how we want to address this. But for those who are not aware necessarily that the Hermit reversed has been their causal factor, it will be through all of these really uncomfortable and destructive mental processes that maybe there will be some learning. Either way, the cycle turns over, right? The wheel continues to turn. Now we have some good guidance here. Number one, oh boy, the Six of Forces is like a reminder, right? That the waterfall, the energy of our emotional state and our feelings has the ability to shape the landscape, right? The power of our emotional of energy, our feeling-based energy, right? Where that comes from, again, that sacral chakra. This is the seat of our creation. It is powerful. It will shape the landscape. It's unstoppable, really. By the time it goes over the edge of the waterfall, you're not stopping it. All you're doing is harnessing it, right? You're not stopping it. You're not turning it around. You're not having it go in reverse, right? We're all on the edge of this waterfall in some ways, and we're going over. So we can harness this energy, kind of like a hydroelectric situation, for instance, right? Niagara Falls is this massive hydroelectric generator. We can harness this energy and use it, right? Our emotional energy. And again, we can use it and harness it instead of being crushed by it. And that's a real danger, and I think that was a real potential over the weekend, and some people are being crushed by it. Absolutely. Some people don't even realize they're being crushed by it. Now the Pueo, or the Hawaiian owl, is about being aware, right? And that's the other part of the waterfall and the symbolism of the power of our water and our intuition and our psychic energy, for instance, right? It's very powerful. So if we're in some stillness here and we are paying close attention, we will get the insight, get the information, get the guidance that we are asking for. But it does require that we are paying very close attention, and it's subtle, right? Well, the waterfall is not as subtle. But again, we have to kind of keep our focus. Again, Mars in Virgo right now. Everything else has to be the outer doors of perception. You want to have them closed off in this moment here if you are going to really get to the spiritual attainment that you are on the pathway towards. And if you're lost, right? If you want guidance, if you're like, I don't know what to do. I mean, this is where praying comes in, right? And getting into the stillness and calming the mind so that you can allow in this information that's not going to come necessarily as a voice in your head, but it'll come through synchronicities. I mean, we know this. We know this now, the synchronicities that come in the number sequence, the synchronicities that come with the song that just like pops up on your playlist based on a certain train of thought, right? A person that reaches out to you, something that you see on the internet, right? An animal that literally comes to you in your actual life at the right time. These are all ways that we're being communicated with by our highest guidance, but we have to pay attention, right? And if we want to utilize again this incredible emotional and feeling based energy that the waterfall represents, we do have to harness it. And if we're stuck, then we can allow in the ancestors, right? We can allow in the guidance. Because again, Virgo is about something more than just us, right? We are part of a lineage. We're part of something more than just ourselves in this moment. And so we can ask for guidance, right? Be guided to a historical perspective that allows us to see where we've come from, all right? Give us some insight onto where, where we could go, where we could put our attention. There's so many ways you could look at this, but you do have to pay close attention. And the best way to keep people from paying close attention is to hack their shadow, right? Get them all caught up in fear instead of utilizing that fear as your own transmutational energy. The friction fire of Sagittarius is the catalyst for transmutation. The friction is what causes the fire. The fire is the catalyst. The catalyst is an energy that doesn't deplete itself, but causes a chemical reaction that changes the very nature of matter. Okay? So we want to pay attention if we're feeling lost, and pay attention to our inner guidance and not be so impacted by the consistent messaging that's coming in. But that does not mean that we shouldn't be aware of what's happening with real people in our real life and be compassionate towards that. And take some action, right? This will require us to take some action to create the landscape that will allow healthy growth in the future. Now, here's the elk. Speaking of integrity, stand tall, maintain your integrity and your dignity no matter what. Even when people are cutting you down, even when people are trying to attack you, believe me, there are more bots on the internet than you think when it comes to a lot of these conversations, especially if you're in like large public groups or responding to certain things in a much more public forum. You're not going to change their minds because they're not even real. Right? They're being paid as an asset, or they're a literal bot that is there to try to shape the narrative of other people. But maintain your dignity, stand tall, speak your truth, because somebody else might see that, and that will be a chain reaction. There's you as a catalyst, right? Bam, 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 bam. We each catalyze the next reaction by just standing in our truth and being and standing tall, right? Literally standing tall. Be in our bodies and allow our bodies to stand tall, right? It's really easy to fold in on yourself, right? And cover your heart. And that's a real postural pattern there that, I would see over and over and over and over again in my clients when I was a body worker. So stand tall physically, actually stand in your power. And along with that is the one of forces, which is just, again, there's another force. There's a lot of forces in this in this reading right now, especially with the Akashic tarot cards, the forces, showing that there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of momentum, right? And the moon in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is fire, right? The friction fire that transmutates, that is the catalyst for alchemy. The one of forces in the Akashic field is pretty self-explanatory in the sense that it all comes from the same infinite ocean of potential, and it's all a vibration. And so when you resonate in your own field with the vibration of what you want to quote unquote manifest, you will attract it in. And that means standing in your integrity, right? Standing in your dignity, standing up for yourself, realizing that it comes from that will allow you to actually stand up to the challenge, right? Face the future, rise to the occasion, physically rise to the occasion and stand in your power, even if you're being, attacked or torn down at every step. You're not going to change anybody's mind necessarily. You're just there to hold the light and be an anchor and realize that it's all there as a potential. And once you are vibrating at that frequency, it will attract to you what it is that is resonant with that. And sometimes it doesn't always turn out the way that we think that it should. And that's something to consider too. Situations will come to us that on the surface at first might seem like they are, why is this challenging situation coming to me? What is going on? And it's not because you've done anything wrong. If you are really tapped into your shadow, if you have hacked your own shadow and you are aware of your subconscious and you are in your body and you're standing in your dignity no matter what, then you will pull towards you, you will attract towards you that which resonates with that. And again, this is part of preparing the groundwork for the new growth as well. But it's not going to happen by resistance. And it's definitely not going to happen by not acknowledging what's going on either and just putting your head in the sand, right? Or running away thinking that you are somehow outside of the realm of reality here, because we all have to be impacted in some way. You don't transmute without fire. You don't rise from the fire without burning down first. And so, many people have gone through this process over years and years and years, and other people are going to do it in a blink of an eye, right? In a blink of an eye. And so if you want to make the most of that situation, I would recommend that you become very aware of your resonance in your body, not in your mind, in your body. You have to know what it feels like in your body, not what you are thinking about, because by the time it gets to your thoughts, it's already in your body. It's already a template in your body that has, made itself, embedded itself. And so it's important you realize this is all down on a frequency level, not your conscious mind. So let's look at the astrology for today. And I know that I'm speaking very firmly, but that's what is needed right now, is for people to all stand in their power. And I'm no different. So I'm just sharing with you what is going on, where that is for me, right? And I am doing the same work that you are, right? It's just that I have different experiences. We all have different experiences that are lending themselves to this situation. So here we are. All right, guys. Here is our chart for today. Like I said, we have our moon still in Sagittarius. So a couple things that we're going to have today, and I'll show you along the way. We're going to have, here, we'll look at this for today. Nope, backwards, my bad. We're going to see that we have the first quarter square, and which is going to be a square between the sun and the moon in Sagittarius. But you also see that it's a T-square. And what is that? Neptune and the sun will be in opposition to each other. So there's some ego battles going on here with the sun and Neptune, which is having us surrender to the will of Source, to God, right? Neptune in Pisces, dissolving everything it touches down into the Akashic field that we just talked about. But our ego and our sense of sovereignty is finding a real challenge and a real tension with that. And when you have a T-square, what it does is this point that is in square to both of these positions, even though it's friction between both of these points, it's the friction of both of these points that allows us to harness the potential energy of an opposition, the tension and opposition. You have this tug of war thing going on, and you don't want to go to one side or the other, right? You want to harness the potential energy that is created with the tension. And the best way to do that with a T-square is to utilize the friction and grow and evolve on both ends. And so we'll talk about that more when we get back to that point. So we'll backtrack to see what's going on throughout the course of the day, because there's other stuff that's happening today as well that's important to be aware of. The first thing we also have a yod between the moon, Mercury in Libra, and Uranus in Taurus, right? And a yod is a finger. It's called a finger of God. And so we'll talk about that too as we go through. So first thing I want to point out is that the moon, right this morning, right as we shifted into Monday on the East Coast, so midnight on the East Coast, so late last night on the West Coast, we have the moon in Sagittarius in a trine to Chiron retrograde. Okay. So Chiron is now in this position in Aries where we are experiencing a repolarization within ourselves as we come to awareness about the difference, cosmic law, and especially some sort of ideal version of cosmic law. It's one thing to have a mystical experience where you have a direct gnosis of what this means, but that doesn't happen all the time. And so many of the world's religions and spiritual context, right? Spiritual practices, they are symbols, right? There are symbols in which the subconscious is able to access what this cosmic law really means. Because unless you're having direct gnosis through a mystical experience, which, most people aren't having 24/7, we utilize symbols in order to allow our subconscious to have a direct connection to that experience. That's the archetypes represent these symbolic representations. This is brought out in so many different ways. And so the issue that I think with Chiron that we're experiencing in this particular degree is that when we find our own subjective consciousness, especially our ego, right? Because Aries is really about the ego consciousness, that beginning point of the subjective I am that I am, right? Just isness, right, in its most pure form, and the ego being the part of the psyche that allows us to survive, and is an important part of being in material form, which is why, it has been misinterpreted for so long that we want to give up the ego, that we want to destroy the ego. And it's like, as long as you're in a human form, in a physical form, you don't really want to give up the ego. You just don't want it to be driving if you're on a spiritual path. You want it to be part of what's happening, for sure. There's no getting around that. So as our own ego consciousness, each of us starts to identify some sort of symbolic representation of natural law or cosmic order, the inevitable polarization, the inevitable other side of that, literally, it polarizes the consciousness, the ego consciousness, into the fact that, well, there's cosmic law and then there's human law, there's social law, right? And we have to grapple with that. Now, where we are really struggling with Chiron, because Chiron is the wounded healer, right? It is that original shame and guilt about who we are, especially in Aries, about who we are, and doing everything that we can to try to assuage that guilt, to heal that shame, to heal other people, to try to heal ourselves, which never ever works, right? Because you have to let go of the identity of that which you feel ashamed and guilty of in order to really heal. And with it being retrograde, it's very obvious right now. It's something that we are each dealing with very internally. It's very obvious. It's, there's resistance to it to a certain extent. And so we're all having this kind of polarization within ourselves right now of like, well, there's what is natural law? I see, or I'm experiencing some symbolic representation of natural law within me. Like I am because I am, right? I am, and therefore I am perfect because I am. Right? That is natural law, that all that is created under, through source, through divinity is in fact, it is part of cosmic law and perfect just the way we are, right? And we have this polarization within ourselves. It's just like, but there's human law that is making other designations, and it's bringing out all kinds of stuff. And there is a real push to try to mitigate this for ourselves by trying to heal other people, to be a savior for other people, to, really push the victim narrative within ourselves as well, because we are dealing with the repolarization within ourselves of what these two things mean, right? That in itself is like a mouthful. And then you have the moon in Sagittarius, which is really having us all feel very optimistic, or certainly very judgmental, right? We're feeling the alchemical fire really burning at the root of us right now. That friction that ultimately creates the fire that catalyzes the reaction, right? The transmutational reaction. And we're feeling it. We're feeling it. And this goes into optimism and honesty and big picture and aiming for the sky, right? The expansiveness of Sagittarius, and also too the dogma and the judgment and the real firm advocacy for the collective belief system or the collective paradigm that we're all operating under. Because it's really in that collective paradigm in Scorpio that we learn the power of our relationships, and then we want to defend it, right? We want to advocate for it. We want to focus on the expansiveness of what we could do with that. And so the thing is that we're feeling, I think in that moment, it's a concept with the moon in Sagittarius that we want to take bold and transcendent action. We're all feeling like on an emotional level, we want to take bold and transcendent action to really transmute something. And it's really finding a lot, and it had found a lot of traction with where Chiron is, as Chiron is, we're experiencing the polarization within us in this moment, and it's really triggering. It's triggering us to do something in order to, again, assuage that guilt or shame about who we are in the moment. And as we feel a really strong, a really strong judgment and a strong urge, because the moon very much urges us, right? Because it's very emotional. And it's in our subconscious, right? We feel very guided and in some ways urged to take action. With Chiron right here, we have to be mindful, and we have to be very careful about how we tread here, because we have to be sure that we are not, in fact, inflaming that Chiron wound even more through our bold and transcendent action. It's a very tricky territory. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have all of the answers about this. What I can do, though, is read the language here, the symbolic language, and show how tricky this territory really is, and that we have to be very, very awake to how we use this transmutational energy, so that we aren't reinforcing the wounding, but actually resolving it and healing it. Now, the moon moves into a conjunction with asteroid Juno, which is in a very difficult place now. Oh, man. And I know I talked about this in the astrology report on Friday, but I'm going to reiterate where Juno is at in Sagittarius. She is at 13 degrees Sagittarius. In my opinion, this is one of the most difficult placements in. There's a number of them, but this one really stands out because what it represents is the retribution that is inevitable when past karma is not resolved before moving on to the next cycle, right? It's the idea that even though the widow's husband is gone, and there is a new cycle presented to this symbolic widow, what has happened in the past will in fact follow her, even though this part of the cycle is already over. And when the moon is in conjunction with asteroid Juno, right, the wife of Zeus, who is the ruler of Sagittarius, and coming into conjunction with her in her husband's sign, this is all representation of symbols, right? She tended to act out in revenge as a result of her betrayal, right? And I'm not saying this is always the case, but when the moon meets Juno at this moment of retribution, it's inevitable, right? We can feel, again, we have to be very mindful of how we use this energy. Because the dark side of Sagittarius absolutely is dogmatism and judgment and the Inquisition, right? We have to be very, very awake to what this energy could be used for. And when we're not, or we are being, we're bypassing our own shadow, then this can easily be, brought to the surface as revenge and betrayal and feeling that the retribution. And so we can just feel it, right? We can just let it move through us rather than acting on it necessarily, which is very difficult with Sagittarius because you want to act on it because you think that you have, in Sagittarius, has the answer. The big picture, the truth. And so when you have the truth and then you feel a sense of responsibility to balancing the scales like Juno, right? That represents marriage and contract and commitment and what happens when we violate these things. There's a really strong tendency here to act out of retribution, and to have to hold that if you're on the other side of it too. That's the other aspect of this. So again, like I said, this is happening overnight, right? So how were your dreams? Like, were your dreams reflecting some of this stuff? I would be curious to know. And let's see here. So then the moon moves into that quincunx, right, with Uranus. This was, again, early this morning. This is also coming into a closer connection to this yod, right? This finger of God, where you have the sextile between the moon and Sag, Mercury in Libra, which is an incredibly important degree here that we're going to talk about, this sextile, and then they're both quincunx, Uranus retrograde in Taurus. And so there's something to be said for anticipating, right? Anticipating where we're going. It's kind of like the groundhog looking for its shadow. It's like, if I can find my shadow, I can, have a better idea of what to expect if I see my shadow or don't see my shadow, right? And what is the shadow other than light shining on material form, mass, and then blocking the light so that it shows its polarized form, right? So you're looking for your shadow. And the quincunx to Uranus is again, there's that alchemical moment here of adjusting ourselves in the very real, very palpable, very distinctly material storm that we have to face, right? The adverse circumstances in our material reality that are the result of the storm, right? Even though it's already passed, we still have to, brave through it. And this is where our character is really tested. And it's about the collective awakening when you're talking about Uranus, especially within us. Now that Uranus is retrograde, we're really going over this territory now within us and going back over it. And there's like I was working with a client Friday, and one of the things that she said in reference to this transit when it was the last full moon was like a key, like a time key being turned. And that's really what happened, I feel like, when Uranus stationed retrograde, is like a key in a lock, like a time key being turned, and having to address and to experience what that really means for each of us individually. Like, we have to now experience like the turning of the wheel and the timeline jumping that other people are doing and how that impacts us, right? That does actually impact us. So on some level here, we are feeling, right, looking for our shadow, the value of anticipating what's coming, and really bringing that into our emotional state. But we still have to adjust ourselves into the reality of right now, right? And how that is making an impact on the collective awakening process that Uranus represents. Now, this connection here with Mercury in Libra is really important, because this is the inevitable process when the relationship between the individual and society, the constructive relationship between an individual and society starts to break down, right? And so a society or your own ego consciousness is order, right? There's a form of order. And that's what Libra kind of represents too, is a form of order, a perfect form of order. And any form of order is going to exclude what it can't hold securely and safely, right? So it'll isolate it, it'll find a prison, some way to isolate that which is going to break down that constructive relationship between the individual and society. And so we all have the power to assume the social risks when it comes to expressing our convictions, right? And we have to face the consequences. And Mercury in this position right now is allowing us to do this through our conscious mind, through our awareness, through our reasoning, through our communication, through our ability to conceptualize the reality outside of us, okay? And so there is an inevitable breakdown in the constructive relationship between individual and society when people start to assume or this, the risk involved by standing up for themselves, right? This is a dynamic process always. And considering where the North Node is right now, that is in a position of Gemini, that is asking for revolutionary action and represents the desire for us to reach beyond what is established, there is a strong push to really test this and to push past this. And Mercury right now is, again, supporting this. And so this sextile, right, that 60-degree angle that represents an investment of our energies between Mercury and the moon, especially when it comes into an exact sextile, and then is that yod that goes right to Uranus at that time. It's still, it's still wide. It's about, but it's still within, 2 to 3 degrees. So it's still technically in astrology, like within a direct, it's still a direct aspect within that 3 degrees. And so this sextile here with the moon and Mercury in particular at that moment is, there is, this degree is so fascinating to me. There's something to be said here for the protection that society, right? Sagittarius is the societal or the cultural belief systems, the collective paradigm. There's something to be said for how it protects people from, people who haven't learned how to deal with the powerful energies of their own unconscious nature, right? We little children wearing sun hats on the beach is the Sabian symbol, right? Because if they aren't wearing a hat or anything, the tendency to get heat stroke or, to be sunburned or whatever is really strong, especially because light, water reflects sunlight. And so it's even more so around there, especially if you're on the beach, right? If you've ever been on the beach without any protection for long periods of time, you know exactly what happens. So there's something to be said for that protection, but there's also something to be said for the fact that eventually it's too much, right? This is where the doctrine comes in and keeps people from having a direct experience with source or their own inner guidance, right? You don't want to completely cover the youth with all of this doctrine and all of this protection so they can't actually have an opportunity to access their own unconscious nature, their own spiritual nature, their own higher self. And so there's something to be said here for the way that the collective paradigm or the belief systems or the big picture is able to kind of like, shelter or shield us from the direct experience. It's why in Judaism, the men wear yarmulkes, because it's kind of it's an affront to God to have your the crown of your head be directly exposed, because the idea is that humans aren't able to handle on a regular basis the direct connection to God all of the time. And so there's something to protect you there. So what does this even mean through all of this, right? Well, we know that through our words and through our communication, through our, through our conceptualization of the world around us, that the relationship between us and society, individuals, and what has been society is breaking down, right? And we can apply this, we can invest this into the feeling that we have here, that we don't want to necessarily, we don't want to, it's very tricky, right? It's very tricky right now because we don't want to completely shield ourselves emotionally from our own subconscious, but we also don't want to expose ourselves, expose other people as well, expose ourselves to our own subconscious when we haven't really led up to exposure to that on, what I mean? This is, oh boy, this is really what happens when people have their awakening in the blink of an eye, right? And so this yod, this finger of God is, it's all connected here to show us how we can utilize this to how we can utilize this and transmute this energy when it comes to the collective awakening process. I know that's a lot of information, and it's, like I said, it's really tricky. It's not a clear-cut type of it's not a clear-cut set of instructions, right? What it is, though, is saying that, how much of the collective paradigm are you going to utilize to shield you, as opposed to maybe it's time to take the bonnet off of the head and to allow more of this direct connection to source and to your own unconscious energies to be invested into your own voice, right? And your own individualization and your dignity and your integrity. And even though those things don't seem to necessarily fit, right? There's that yod again, right? The finger of God. It is pointing to the fact that this process can be alchemized by these two elements of where Mercury and the moon in Sagittarius reside. So, it'd be easy if I could just tell you what to do. But that's not how we learn, is it? We have to figure it out on our own and through our own process. Now, the moon comes and then squares the sun. And then there's that T-square with the opposition with the sun and Neptune, which will be exact early tomorrow. So one thing I'd like to point out about where the moon is, number one, this degree represents the way that we can contain ourselves within an environment that we feel completely foreign within, right? And so we have our own special makeup, whatever that is. And sometimes we feel like the environment around us is foreign or alien. And so we're not completely separating ourselves from it, but we're using that special background, whatever that is, in order to exist. Right? So there's a containment there, but there's also living within the context of the larger picture that we participate in. So there again is that friction of the two polarities that Sagittarius represents. That is where we find our midpoint between this really strong kind of ego desire to put on the armor and step into this royal coat of arms and accept the position of where we are right now, right? This is where the sun is. It's really illuminating it and how we're expressing ourselves right now. And then Neptune in Pisces, of course, is having us dissolve everything down into the God-given mandate that is coming down from the mountain, that has nothing to do with us putting on anything, but of us accepting it and applying it to our everyday life. These things, this is going to be a real ego battle right here between us as individuals and our own ego consciousness in the sun and the will of source, right? The larger, the full picture of everything going back to the very basic mandate from, the boss, right? From God, from source, whatever, however you conceptualize it. This is a really strong battle. And so being able to contain ourselves and that connection here, while also, so you put on the armor, right? You shield yourselves in some ways with this coat of arms, whatever it is, your special background, what makes you unique, what makes you connected to yourself, what allows you to actually step into the full role of the lineage you're part of, but at the same time, you're not completely shutting yourself off. You know what I mean? You're not allowing yourself, you're still allowing yourself to interact with the world around you and to take what is given to you and make the most of it in an environment that you really don't feel like you belong in. And this is going to be, I think this is really where we're going to find our most sense of empowerment today. Also, too, I want to point out that this particular degree is in the head of Ophiuchus, the snake bearer, or Asclepius, depending on how you characterize it, right? The head, Ras Al Haig, the head of the snake charmer. Again, here comes that serpent medicine. There comes that Draco stuff coming back around again. How do we utilize it? How do we not be controlled by it, but allow it to move through us? If we can manage this, right? If we can manage this incredibly potent medicine without it taking us over, without us using it to exploit other people, there's that exploitation thing again. When we can do that, again, this is how we're going to be able to utilize this tension here the most, how we can find our balance point between completely losing ourselves and also shielding ourselves to the point where we can't even allow inspiration to come in, because we do have to still allow inspiration on a spiritual level to come in, and to accept that ultimately Source is responsible for all of it, right? It's not us individually that's responsible for all of it. We have to allow that mandate to come in. And I hate to use the word mandate, but that's actually part of the Sabian symbol for 22 degrees Pisces. We have to allow that mandate to come in without being so closed off that we don't even realize that we're being divinely inspired in that moment. And part of that is going to be able to manage this space of keeping our integrity, but also allowing ourselves to be able to move through the environment that doesn't seem like we belong there. And part of that is our ability to harness this incredibly potent serpent medicine, right? The Kundalini. We can't let it control us or lead us to psychosis. We have to be the masters of it. So this is where the moon is at in this square. And of course, the first quarter square is a crisis in action. So we are going to be asked, what are we going to do in this moment? What are we going to do? And so, of course, the moon, like I said, is square Neptune. It's square the sun at the same time, and then comes into a sextile with Jupiter in Aquarius by the end of today, right? And so we find this sextile right here, and we're getting very close to the galactic center with late Sagittarius, and again, we can kind of anticipate. There's a sense of anticipation that comes along with Sagittarius, being able to see where we're going as a result of what work we are doing, right? We have a goal in mind, and that comes out a lot more when we get to Capricorn. But we have a goal in mind for our transmutation, right? Our alchemy has a goal. It has, what are we trying to accomplish here? Well, we're trying to turn lead into gold. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't have something in mind that we are actually working towards, which again, very Capricorn. This is going to become very clear to us on an emotional level when the moon moves into Capricorn. But in this moment here, we can feel the anticipation of where we're headed, knowing that this is where we're headed, and it allows for us to transmute these emotional energies in order to utilize them when the time comes. And this is where Jupiter in Aquarius really assists us, because remember, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So Jupiter might be in Aquarius right now, but it's expanding on and advocating and being a real benefactor for this futuristic, humanitarian, Aquarian aspect that is allowing us, and it really is like supporting and defending and advocating for us to transmute our emotional energies into a much more collective purpose. We take our emotional energies and we transmute them and apply them to the collective, right? It's not just about us. That's Leo, right? The opposite of Aquarius. Aquarius is about the human collective. It is about the group, right? Whatever the group is, your networks, your associations, your social networks, your community, right? In this case, the global community. It is about taking those emotional energies and transmuting them for the sake of the humanitarian aspect. And part of that is going to come from the investment of knowing where we're going, right? Being able to hold the resonance of where we're going, and then taking the friction fire of Sagittarius and actually bringing those together in the process of transmutation. But if you don't have a goal in mind of where we're going, what's the point? Then you can just have that harnessed for somebody else, right? And this just goes all the way back to that aspect that if you're not aware of yourself, if you're not doing the shadow work, and if you're cannot clearly visualize where we're going. And this is where Mars and Virgo right now is so important, because this is about pushing out and closing the doors of outer perception to on a spiritual level, so you can actually put your fire into this process right here. And we can feel it, right? We can feel where we're going and kind of utilize that feeling to kind of practice or play in some ways. It's like a little kid on a rocking horse, right? They're like, I'm going to grow up and, you know, I'm mimicking the oscillating energy of the rocking horse. I'm mimicking the energy that we utilize to actually transmute on a spiritual level by playing in a way. Wow, that was really loud. Playing in a way on the rocking horse. That's actually the Sabian symbol. And again, the investment into a real advocacy for transmutation of our own emotional energies for the humanitarian purpose. We can invest that energy into this, and boy, oh boy, you know what I mean? Like total expansion at that point. But we have to see where we're going. And it can be really difficult to see where we're going if we get caught up in the fear. But it also is just as difficult if we don't see the whole picture and we're not taking both aspects of the polarity and bringing them together into wholeness. This is why hacking your own shadow is so important. So important, right? Because otherwise somebody else hacks it, right? And Patrick Berge talked about that in Shadowgate. I mean, that's kind of like his thesis about all of the ShadowNet, is that all of that ShadowNet was developed to hack into the shadow of humanity. Now, the hubris of that is thinking that you can control that. And so that's really our saving grace, is that they can't really control the collective's unconscious because it's outside of the realm of their control as long as we are awake to ourselves. So I think that's plenty of information for today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you're interested in a reading, or energetic support for your process at all, you can go to my website, catalystenergies.net, and book a service through there. And you can also find Catalyst Energies on Telegram and Facebook if you just want to stay in touch in terms of social media. And I will be here tomorrow for the Daily Medicine transmission on Tuesday. First quarter square happens exact at 4:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, there's our crisis in action. What are we going to do? And it's really a very interesting time right now of not bypassing what's happening, but not falling into the fear narrative about it. And that's real mastery right there. And so we're all being called to the carpet to do that right now. So wherever you are on your journey, just be easy on yourself. Realize that we're all in this together. And also too that like I said, it's already happened. So how we experience the process as it unfolds is really up to us and our own choice. And so there are plenty of options ahead of us, and it's really just up to each one of us to make the choice of how we're going to fulfill this process. So I love you guys. Thanks for being here. I truly appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.